In 2017, a small Italian record label released a recording of a strange composition. Before its release, the music, if you can call it that, had in all likelihood not been available to the public for close to 50 years. On the single side, 10-inch vinyl record, a woman's voice sings an eerie lament or a strange lullaby, the kind Ophelia would sing to herself after going insane in Hamlet. This singing is paired with a mournful piano, the chord sounding like a darker and more inconsolable version of Eric Satie's piece Elegy. The lyrics of the song are monotonous. They vary very little, and within the 8-minute and 55-second recording, a certain refrain becomes quickly familiar. That is, dead horse in Danish. This unsettling piece of music was made in conjunction with an even more disturbing piece of art. This music was superimposed onto an experimental performance art piece, or happening, 17 minutes and 35 seconds long, created on a Super 8 roll of coloured film. Performed on the 30th of January 1970 on the cold white plains of Helling, Denmark, a 22-year-old artist by the name of Bjørn Nørgaard role-plays a pagan priest ritually slaughtering and dismembering a horse in protest to the then ongoing war in Vietnam and the starvation crisis in Biafra, a short-lived republic that had declared independence from Nigeria in 1967. Though Nørgaard is not a priest, the horse really was euthanized, and he really did dissect the horse, all of it being broadcast to a sizable audience, completely horrified by what they were seeing. After the performance occurred, all the dissected equine parts found their final home in hundreds of jam jars to be displayed as exhibition pieces, which, as you can imagine, did nothing to calm down the furore. The performance was called Hesteofringen, or horse sacrifice. In the 70s, Nørgaard was a young experimental artist who had already worked in various mediums, from sculpture and painting to architecture, film and happenings, these sort of performance artworks. Though he changed mediums often, everything he did tried to fabricate a bridge between the abstract world of art and the physical world around him. Perhaps that's why his work often exists in 3D space. In the same way that abstract concepts like politics and culture are made real by actions, decisions and events, Nørgaard's art, particularly his performance art, superimposes its symbolism onto the world it inhabits, and in doing so confronts, reflects and affects it in hopes to inspire change. That was the kind of idea he had for this ritual. It certainly looked like a ritual sacrifice, but you could argue there was no true meaning behind it. Nørgaard, though looking the part, dressed in a brown leather tunic and red ceremonial headband wrapped around his head, was obviously an amateur at ritualistic dismemberment. It's clear from the film that his dissection is artless and clumsy. His collaborator, artist Linni Pedersen, plays the priestess, dressed in a red, black and white robe. She walks around the slaughter and dissection in a circle, dragging a large cross behind her as she sorrowfully sings about the dead horse in a tune vaguely reminiscent of a corrupted Ring-a-Ring-a-Roses. My beloved dead horse, I'm crawling in your dead body, lying in the dark, in your intestines, in your soft intestines, oh just the world was a dead horse. These are some of the translated lyrics of Pedersen's song, almost nonsensical, but still able to give off a feeling of malevolence, both mourning and relishing in the death of the horse at the same time. Even the green violin, played by another collaborator and artist, Henning Christiansen, drones dolorous notes that sharp and grate against the ears. Even the circumstances of the horse's death sentence are not what it seems. The horse, called Chile, was already old and was in fact put down by a trained vet. Put all these elements together and the ritual is like a simulacrum, or imitation of a ritual, where all the actions and aesthetics remain but the true meaning of the reverence and ceremony are lost. But in another way, the ritual, quote-unquote, is not meaningless at all. The meaningless, ritualistic slaying of a horse was supposed to reflect the mindless loss of life in Vietnam and Biafra. The colours that feature in the film have symbolic meaning. At the time, the red and black cloth draped over the horse was meant to symbolise anarchism and socialism, but these colours, along with white and green, are colours often used in flags and speak of a country's national identity. Red is often used for national death, sacrifice and revolution. Black is mourning and remembrance, white for peace and green for hope and prosperity. If the horse ritual was an imitation of deep spirituality and reverence, then the then ongoing media conversation about Vietnam, especially coming from the US, was an imitation of nationalistic strength and moral superiority, and the anger towards the slaying of the horse drew to the fact that people were angrier at the death of an old horse than the countless loss of life in these two regions. Nørgaard anticipated this response with a quote that would appear in the eventual exhibit of the art piece. "It is not the death of the horse, it is the insane sacrifices of the human world in Vietnam and Biafra." That being said, this performance almost didn't happen. The Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark, which had planned to exhibit Nørgaard's happening, declined in the end to accept the sacrifice he planned to do within its four walls, as well as his wish to house the live horse in the museum before the act was completed. Thankfully for Nørgaard, and not really anyone else at the time, the newspaper outlet Ekstra Bladet, which was Denmark's largest daily newspaper at the time, collaborated with the artist and was able to broadcast the performance from the empty field it took place. The response was as you might expect. People didn't accept the performance as art and were disgusted at the display, which, to be fair, after watching the film myself, is brutal and hard to watch by anyone's standard. The response was so heated that Nørgaard had to leave his apartment in Copenhagen for 3 months due to the threats and vandalism. More than 50 years on, and horse sacrifice is still a shocking piece of contemporary art. It also poses an important question even after all these years. That is, how far is too far in art? Is it ethical to use the life of a creature as a means to express your ideas, even if it was going to perish naturally anyway, and even if you use it to draw attention to a noble cause? Because in that way, the horse was exactly a sacrifice. The art piece did succeed in bringing more attention within Denmark to the wars happening in these regions I mentioned, with more art becoming more political and more politics becoming more radicalized. This may be a question that will gain increasing importance when considering the future of contemporary art.